Today I'm going to be showing you how to play the London system or the London opening for white. Today I'm just going to be showing you some of the most common setups, some of the popular moves and attacking ideas for white and some of black's main responses. The London opening gets a lot of hate online, which I'm not sure why, because it's a very solid opening and you can play it at beginner level all the way up to grandmaster level. You'll even see Magnus Carlsen himself play this a few times, so it is a very solid opening and I do recommend learning it. It's very flexible, follows good opening principles and creates a lot of flexibility for white, as there's a few attacking ideas just in the opening. So the London starts off with d4 and d5. Can be variations in the move order, but as long as you get this opening here, you can transpire into a London system. So you want to put your bishop on f4. Let's just say black plays knight f6 as an example. White then plays e3 here, building this kind of pyramid structure, which is the main kind of idea of the London system. And the whole point of the London system is you want to get this kind of pyramid of pawns, with the pawn being on c3 as well, and it allows flexibility for your bishops and knights to jump in and control the center. So here I'm going to show you the opening where black plays one of the most aggressive moves, which is playing c5, challenging this pawn straight away, but white just ignores this here and develops the knight to f3. The reason why black plays this is to obviously challenge for the center, but also gain queenside activity by potentially putting the queen on b6, attacking b2, and obviously if white takes this pawn, black can just push and then win the pawn back with the bishop. So after knight f3, black might play something like knight c6. White plays knight d2, which is obviously slightly different from its normal square, which is c3. Then you might just have a common setup like this, where black plays e7 with the bishop, keeping it very solid and looking to castle short, and then white develops this bishop here, and then black castles, and then white normally puts the queen on maybe c2 or e2, and then can just castle as well. But this is a common London setup where you've got this pyramid of pawns, you've got the two bishops which are active. Notice how obviously the bishop is on d3, so just in case black pushes c4, you can just bring this bishop back, and there's a lot of tension within the middle of the board with knight jump and active play. But this is a very common London position. Obviously you might get different variations, especially at beginner level. They might have played the bishop here, they might have pushed these pawns on the queen side, but ultimately looking at white's position, this is the common setup you want to aim for. And one of the key themes of the London is to control these e4 and e5 squares, and if you can safely control these, then you do have a good advantage out of the opening. One of the first tactics I like is actually jumping the knight into e5. The reason why we're doing this is because I want to actually put the queen on the f3 square to start a kingside attack already at the opening. So if black takes this knight here, you can take back with the pawn, which actually kicks black's knight back. Then white can actually move the queen all the way over to h5 and start attack on this square here, which is looking already very dangerous for black. And this is one of the advantages of putting the bishop on d3, is it stares right down at this weak h7 square, so if black does castle short, it can be very dangerous for them. Now obviously this isn't losing for black. Black's got many ways to defend this, probably through pushing pawns. But one of the reasons I don't like to castle early in the London for white is because let's say black blocks by going here. Obviously you can take with en passant, but you can actually just start pushing these pawns all the way up the king side and then put the rook on the g file to back this attack. And this is one of the common attacking themes I like as white. Playing something like h3 and g4 to try and open this file for the rook and put further pressure down the h file. Taking it back to this position in the London, which is very early on in the game, when black plays c5, which is a common move, they might not play it at beginner level, but I would say around maybe 700 up to 1500 they might play this. You can actually take on c5 because black will play e6 then, trying to obviously win this pawn back with the bishop. But you can actually defend the pawn by actually going b4, and black might play something like e5, challenging this pawn and opening the file for the rook. But you can again play c3, defending this pawn, and everything's still nicely defended for white here. And then if black plays b6, trying to then attack this pawn, a key trick in this position is to actually take this knight here, and then once taken back with the rook, you can give a check, and then once this is blocked maybe with the bishop, which is obviously the most likely move, you can just push this pawn up the board, and the computer says here that white's actually winning this position just because of the amount of pressure you've got on this queen side. Now this is obviously a position you're probably not going to get because at beginner level it's very rare you're going to see those exact sequence of moves, but this is just an idea to keep in mind, that you can actually take the pawn on c5 if black does play c5, and you would essentially be up a pawn. Now positionally, you probably don't want to do that, and me personally, I don't prefer to take on c5. I prefer to get the whole London setup in straight away, but it just depends what you feel comfortable with. If you're in a position like this, I'm going to show you another sequence of moves that you might want to deploy, which is once I've moved the knight to f6, you can play knight c3 here, which is obviously different from the original square of playing to d2, which is what's called the Jbava London system, if I've pronounced that right. And basically the whole point of this is you're putting a lot of pressure on the c7 square straight away because you want to jump in with the knight to b5, which is very similar to the fried liver attack, but on the opposite side of the board. Instead of targeting the f7 square, you're targeting the c7 square. And obviously if you get a knight on here protected by the bishop, it's a fork, so you're winning the rook for the knight essentially, and the game should be winning straight out the opening. There are a lot of other lines in the Jbava London system which I'm not going to go into, but this is just one idea you should probably consider exploring. But this only works when black plays f6 here. Now in the London system, you've obviously got this really powerful light squared bishop pointing at the king side, and they might want to take your light squared bishop and just trade it to kind of take that piece off the board. And in this position at all, you shouldn't be as scared to trade bishops, because you can just essentially activate your queen, and then you can just start pushing these pawns up the board and still develop the rest of your pieces. So black might think they're getting an upper hand by trading bishops early on, but it wouldn't affect white's opening at all really. Another common theme with trading bishops is that black actually might want to trade their dark squared bishops. So a common move here is obviously you've got this really powerful bishop in the centre of the board, and black will play the move bishop d6, attempting to trade bishops and then activate black's queen. Now in my personal opinion, I don't actually like to trade bishops here because there's no really any benefit for black, so I just like to bring the bishop back, and if black then decides to trade, it opens up the h file for the rook, and if say black castles next move, you can simply get a position like this where you're putting a lot of pressure on the king side for black, and it's very dangerous for them. Also, if you did trade bishops then and the pawn takes back, it gives black a lot of control over these central pawns. It covers the whole of e4 and e5, and it's going to be very hard for you to jump in with the knight later on in the game. If you are in this position and let's say you make a random move like your bishop here, then black wants to take your bishop, you can actually just take, and it's actually okay for white. I don't prefer this setup myself, but once you, let's say black castles here and then you play here, you've still got the kind of three in a row from the pawns, and you've still got a kind of dangerous setup. And one thing I like to do in this position is, let's say black makes a random move, you can actually castle and then move your rook over to the e file, and you control all the squares on the e file pretty much. So even though black might think they're getting one up and neutralizing your London system, it's completely fine here for white, and you shouldn't be scared to play this at all. One thing you might face when trying to play the London system is some players might actually want to defend using like a King's Indian style setup. So you'll go d4 and they'll play g6. So you can find yourself in this kind of position, and the main difference here is when they do a King's Indian is straight away I'm developing the knight to c3 instead of d2 to push this e-pawn and take control of the centre. Obviously I've still got the bishop here on f4, and the whole point is black can't really commit themselves to castle yet because they don't know what it's going to do. And again, you can actually just develop normally and start pushing the kingside pawns up the board, and white should be completely fine. But the main difference is when I do play the King's Indian, I'm just like to take control of the centre straight away and play this knight c3 move instead of knight d2. There are lots of different tactics within the London, and these are just a few positions that I like to play. When you're playing at the beginner level, there's so many different move orders that it's too much to come over on a beginner level. So I do recommend looking at some of the positions that I've shown today and putting them in the engine and trying to find out what the best moves are, etc. Another way of actually just learning is actually just playing the London system on some maybe rapid games and stuff like that to get a feel for the different types of positions. I do think it's a really strong opening, like probably gets criticised more than it should. It's very flexible, so even if your opponent as black plays something completely different that throws off your kind of theory or the sequences, you can still take advantage of that game. I think the main thing when learning the London is to try and learn why you're playing the moves you're playing instead of just playing them for the sake of it. So with this bishop on f4, which is obviously one of the most common moves in the London, try and understand why you're playing it and at what times you should probably bring it back or maybe swap the bishops off and stuff like that. But really the London's a very solid opening that I highly recommend playing as a beginner.